So, Jason Banducci, Vice President of Corporate Development and Investor Relations at Integra Resources, and I oversee all activities related to looking for new projects, building out the company, making sure that we're communicating everything we do to the market, and that's to retail investors, to institutional investors, and the broader investment community. So I did a undergraduate degree at the University of Western Ontario and graduated. Had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. Ended up working at TD Bank on the lending side, and after a couple of years, decided that this was not something I could do for a long term, and so I ended up going back to do an MBA at Queen's University, came out of that, and eventually found a job in mining investment banking. And I kind of grew up in the mining sector. My mother was the CFO of IAMGold for 15 years. So I always got to see, the cool things she was doing, the amazing places she was traveling, and really the benefit that mining brought to some of these communities. And so I was always drawn to mining and kind of decided after a few years of working for the bank that I wanted to get into the mining space. And I was always interested in finance and capital markets. So I was lucky to find a job in mining investment banking at GMP Securities. And ended up staying there for many more years than I had originally anticipated going into investment banking. And so I stayed. GMP was acquired by Stiefel Financial, and so I ended up staying almost 5 years in total. And actually, as an investment banker, helped the former CEO of Integra, Jason Kosec, put together Millennial Precious Metals. And so as a banker, I helped them raise $24 million and list on the TSX-V. And eventually we merged Millennial Precious Metals with Integra Resources, and that's how I ended up here. But it's been an interesting and fun road. So on the corporate development side, it's really all about growing the business. And so, we've been quite busy on the M&A side as we spoke about the merger with Integra and Millennial Precious Metals. So I handled that process through initial due diligence, and that's both on the financial and technical side. And so managing that process, managing both internal teams, external consultants to evaluate opportunities, and ultimately to put transactions and deals together. And so that really leans on my previous experience on the investment banking side. As an investment banker, this is what you do over and over and over again. And so, we looked at M&A and also raising capital, both on the debt and equity side. So I'm able to use those skill sets in the job now. We're lucky with the acquisition of Florida Canyon. We don't need to raise equity again until we end up building Delamar. But as a development stage company, you have to raise money every year. And so part of my job on the corporate development side was, again, finding that capital and dealing with institutional investors and structuring and completing those financings. So that corporate development side of the job really leans on the investment banking experience that I had and even the lending experience that I had prior to investment banking. On the investor relations side, I would say, the responsibilities are primarily in communicating with the financial and investment community what the company is doing and providing updates and acting as that external facing person to communicate everything that we do as a company. And so, part of that is dealing with investors. Part of that is creating materials that we use, so the corporate presentation, the website, organizing conferences, anything to do with anything happening externally, it falls under my responsibility. Again, leaning back on my experience as an investment banker, if you look at the companies that ultimately are successful in the mining space, I mean, we're seeing the world get more and more crazy. And if you read the headlines today, I think there was helicopters that stole hundreds of $1 millions of Barrick gold in Africa. And so I think you're seeing investors want more and more exposure to good jurisdictions. And that's one of the things that stood out to me. One, when I originally joined Millennial Precious Metals, you have exposure to Nevada. And if you ask anyone, with any job related to mining, what's one of the number one jurisdictions for gold mining? Nevertheless, heap leach oxide gold mining, everyone will point to Nevada. And so that stuck out to me. And so, in my view, we're in the right place. And that's that's a very, very important part when you're looking at attracting capital from the investment community, right? And so that's something that really stood out to me. The other side to it is financeability, and especially when we used to be a development stage company, but even now as a producer, our projects are generally looked at as simple, low capital, simple, gold heap leach projects. And so to me, I like that, right? So when we're raising money, especially as a $300 or $400 million company, the initial capex of our development stage projects is within reach, right? We're not talking billions of dollars. And so to me, those are the two most important things: is jurisdiction and the type of projects that we're working with. And I think this is really as good as it gets. So the challenges that faced Integra were really no different than the challenges that faced most other exploration and development companies. You have zero source of cash flow, right? And so in order to finance and advance projects, which is what investors are looking for, you need to raise money every year. And the only way to really do that as an exploration and development company is to issue equity, right? And so you have this constant battle of running out of money and trying to get things done, right? And so I think this is not a new problem. I think the new problem is that there's been less and less investor interest in these types of stories, and so we recognize that. I think we were in a unique position where we have put together a really, really strong shareholder registry where we were able to continue to finance, but it's a very challenging business to run, because as soon as you finish a financing and complete a financing and get that cash into your bank account, you're already thinking about the next one. And so, for us, we began to think about looking for producing assets, and naturally, the first place we looked was in our backyard, which is in the Great Basin of the Western United States. And the reality is there's just not that many producing assets, one, that aren't owned by the major mining companies, and two, there weren't that many that were for sale. And so we had made inbounds on a couple and really didn't make any progress. And then, we were fortuitously presented with the opportunity of Alamos buying Argonaut and then putting their non-core assets basically up for sale into a spinco. And so we recognized what a unique opportunity this was, and we were really aggressive about going after the asset. And for us, it checked a couple boxes. One, it's in your backyard, so it reduces risk. We're not having to deal with multiple time zones, multiple jurisdictions. This is literally located right next to two of our development stage projects. And so we saw opportunity to be more aggressive because, in our view, we would have more control over some of the assets or some of the components of the opportunity as we look to develop everything. And really what the opportunity presented us with was a cash flowing mine that wasn't huge, does 70,000 ounces per annum of gold production steady state. So it's a little bit too small for any of the big guys to care. But for us, it was meaningful. And we were looking for an asset that could generate 15 to 20 million of free cash flow a year which would allow us to advance our development stage projects, to cover our G&A, and not have to come back to the market every year for the dreaded equity financing where you take the hat off and bring it around to all your shareholders and hope that you can find a couple new ones, and hope that you don't have to do a full warrant and all this ugly structure that investors hate, because you have no other way of finding money. So you're backed into a corner, and that's what we've seen across the space. And we were successful in our bid on Florida Canyon, and we no longer have that need, and we're generating significant operating cash flow, more than enough to again continue the development work and to cover all of our internal costs. So it's a very good place to be. We had to take some risk to get here, but it's certainly playing out the way we had hoped. The only thing that matters is people and the quality of the asset. And so I think we saw an opportunity as far as the asset goes where this asset, this mine has been in production for 25 years, right? And so for us, having a little bit of predictability and the ability to consistently produce gold, it's not going to produce 100,000 ounces, but it will produce 75,000 ounces very predictably. There's been a lot of done work, and so for us, it's the risk mitigation and knowing that this mine is going to continue to produce, and if we can continue to put those results out under the Integra banner, we think that's going to gain more and more credibility to us as a producing company. I think in making that transition, we were in a position where we needed to add some more executive talent to again reflect the new needs of the company as a producer. And so we went out and hired Cliff Lafleur as our COO. Cliff was just came off of a win with Silvercrest, which sold to Core Mining for over $1.5 billion. And so he has the experience of putting a mine into production, ramping it up, working through some of the kinks and issues that face new mines. And so he's got that operational and optimization expertise, which we think is going to be big for both the company and the asset as we continue to prove ourselves as a producing company. The nice thing with a lot of the other team members is while we were working for a development stage company at the time, there's still many of the team members that have experience with producing companies. And so, we get to lean on that a little bit more now. Case in point would be Scott Olson, who's one of our vice presidents. And, he spent 15 or 20 years at Bald Mountain for Kinross. And so he's got deep experience in heap leach and mining in Nevada. And so while we were, leaning on Scott for other reasons previously, now we can really push him and take advantage of the hands-on experience he has as far as heap leaching goes in Nevada. So I think from a business development perspective, obviously the company's in a very different place than we were a year ago. Almost a year ago was when we announced the transaction, and now we've become a full-fledged producing company. And so now the type of opportunities that we can look for growth is a lot more toward more production and development, but to the scale that we could never really look at before. And that being said, we also were generating cash. We've got over 60 million of cash on the balance sheet. And so now when we look at opportunities, some of that could be funded through some of the cash we have on hand. And so I think it's put us into a different snack bracket as far as what we can do and what we can look at from a corporate development standpoint and really how we look at growing the business. I think that we see significant opportunity to grow the business organically through some of the work we're doing at Florida Canyon. And then really the second leg of growth comes from Delamar and Nevada North, which are our two development stage projects. And so, it's been a lot more fun. I would say we can look and do more than we ever thought was possible, even just last year, from a corporate development standpoint. And then from an investor relations standpoint, I think, we closed the transaction with Florida Canyon, officially became producers in November of last year. And, even this week I'm working on the results for the upcoming Q2 earnings call. And so, we're in this whole new, I would say, space of investor communication and investors that we appeal to as a producing company, now reporting earnings, generating cash flow, and having to allocate capital. And so I think, we have seen we've seen more investors be open to hearing the Integra story. We did some marketing in New York in the spring and had 3 full days of accounts that we had never seen, 90% we had never seen before. And so I think doors are opening. I think also with a continued strong gold market, you're seeing more and more generalist investors come into the space, and they're really only looking at production, right? And so I think being positioned as a new producer, as a growing producer, and having those assets and having that production in the United States has really resonated with investors. And so we've got current shareholders that are happy. The share price is up significantly over the last 12 months. And then we are appealing to new shareholders. And that's mostly, I would say, because of the real leverage we have to the gold price now. We're selling gold at well over $3,200 per ounce. And so it's been a good story to tell. So it's interesting. I think if you look at Integra's business model, we are a producer, but a large portion of our net asset value still sits in development stage. And that's with Delamar, which will be kicking off federal permitting this year, and Nevada North, which is a bit earlier stages. So you really have 3 main segments of the value of the company. You've got Florida Canyon, which is producing, and then you've got Delamar and Nevada North, which are going to have more of that development exploration style of NAV. And so we are a producer, and we are producing gold, and we're selling gold, and we're generating free cash flow. But relative to the size of the company, it's still heavily in the development stage. And so where we think we should trade from a valuation perspective is somewhere between the large scale development companies that have assets in good jurisdictions and junior producers, right? So if you look at where junior producers trade in the market right now, it's about 0.7 times price to net asset value. If you look at where the high quality development stage companies trade, again, focused in the United States in a good jurisdiction, you're probably at 0.3 to 0.4 times price to NAV. And so we think we should be somewhere in between. And we believe that through continued execution at Florida Canyon, showing that the mine is producing gold quarter over quarter, consistently generating cash and removing our need to keep coming back to the market, we'll see our multiple, trade closer in line with a junior versus a developer. That said, the other way we get the multiple to move up is reducing the timelines for Delamar and Nevada North to production. The closer you get that NAV to a production date, the higher the value is going to go, the less years you're discounting back those cash flows. And so I think it's those 2 things, those 2 key areas that we're focusing on, is generating cash flow, showing that Florida Canyon works and will continue to work for many years to come, and showing material progress at Delamar and Nevada North, where you get visibility on a mining permit, which is, we think, what ultimately delivers value. And you've seen that happen with the likes of Perpetual Resources as a big developer. If you look at the share price there, the closer that company and that mine moved to a production decision, the higher the share price went, right? The more you de-risk those cash flows. And so that's really what the goal is this year. I would say over the last 6 months, or really since we closed the transaction, the focus has really been on the investor relations side versus corporate development. I think we want to continue to build out the story and see us trade in line with where where our peers are before we can start to look at more corporate development activities, i.e. M&A, going to build out the company more. And so on the investor relations side, really what we're focused on for the first half of the year has been, one, getting back out there to talk to current shareholders, people who know who Integra is, and say, look, we're not a developer anymore. We're actually producing gold. And you'd be surprised how many conversations we have where people, haven't quite caught on to the fact that we're no longer a development stage company. And so that's been a big effort, both on the institutional and retail side. I think a lot of time I spend working with the broker community, so all the analysts, sales professionals, and investment bankers. And so same mandate really is to get people to understand what we're doing, because it's not quite typical to what you've seen in the market. There's not really many other companies doing what we're doing, which is self-funded development essentially. And so it takes a little bit more work to understand what we're doing, what the key catalysts are, how to understand the valuation. So a lot of the work I'm spending, a lot of time I spend with the analyst community to make sure that from a research perspective, they're modeling the company correctly. They're thinking about future catalysts correctly. They're understanding how they can pitch it to their accounts, to their investors correctly, and really what the opportunities for re-rate truly are. And so, one of the measures that I get benchmarked on is the analyst target price going up, and not just because the gold price is going up. Does the analyst and investor community understand where the catalysts are? And for us, again, the continued free cash flow from Florida Canyon, growth at Florida Canyon, and then Delamar updated feasibility study coming out this year, and shortening that timeline to when we think we can build it and then getting a permit. So there's a lot of time spent there. Having the U.S. still remains to be the deepest financial market, deepest market of investors, even on the mining side. And so we spend a lot of our time pitching this story to that community, and it's really resonated, obviously, with the geographic location of all of our assets and what we're doing, and with some of the initiatives that the Trump administration has put forward as far as being pro mining, wanting to shorten and simplify permitting timelines, and really reduce the duplication of work that we've sometimes seen in the past. And so a lot of time is communicating that to investors. And as the company has grown and move into this, the market cap's grown, the share price has grown, the fact that we're producing gold, everything's changed. And so we're now, I would say, appealing to more indices, an ETF style investor, more the passive style investment vehicles. And so we were recently added to a silver index. We expect to be eligible for the GDXJ by the end of this year. And so, we're focused there to making sure that Integra is appealing to a broader universe of investors, especially if you want leverage to the gold and you want exposure to the United States. This should be on the top of your list.